It's a funny thing, isn't it? An argument, two people, sometimes more, all standing around talking louder and louder, faces getting a little red, nobody really listening to what the other person is saying. It's like a game of tennis, where both players are just hitting their own balls against the wall, hoping to make the most noise. We've all been there. You're absolutely convinced you're right about something. It could be a political issue, a scientific fact, or just the best way to cook a steak, and the other person is just as convinced that you are completely, utterly, and spectacularly wrong, and the more you talk, the further apart you seem to get. It's a frustrating dance, and most of the time, nobody ends up changing their mind. Why is that? Why are these conversations so useless? Well, I think it's because we go into them with the wrong goal. We think the point of an argument is to win. We see it as a battle, a contest of wills and wits. My ideas against your ideas, my intelligence against yours, and whoever scores the most points or gets the last word in wins the prize. But the moment you frame it that way, the moment it becomes about winning, you've already lost the most important thing. You've lost the chance to learn something. Your brain, which is a magnificent machine for figuring things out, switches off its curiosity module and turns on its defense module. It's no longer a scientist, it's a soldier, and its only mission is to protect the fortress of what you already believe. There's a wonderful, warm, satisfying feeling that comes with being right, isn't there? Our ego loves it. It puffs up its chest and says, "See, I told you so." It's a very seductive feeling, and we build our identities around it. My beliefs become part of me, so if you attack my belief, it feels like you're attacking me personally, and of course, I'm going to fight back. Once you're in that defensive crouch, your logic gets twisted. You're no longer looking for the truth. You're looking for ammunition. You start listening to the other person, not to understand their point, but to find a flaw, a crack you can use to dismantle their position. You're not a collaborator in a search for reality. You are an enemy soldier on a search and destroy mission. You'll see this everywhere. People will grab onto any piece of evidence that supports their side, no matter how flimsy, and they'll ignore or explain away mountains of evidence that contradict it. It's called confirmation bias, and it's the best friend of the ego and the worst enemy of the truth. It's the little voice in your head that whispers, "Don't listen to that. It will only confuse you." The real trap, the deep, dark, clever trap, is that you can be very, very good at this game. You can learn all the rhetorical tricks, all the ways to make your opponent look foolish. You can be quick with a comeback. You can poke holes in their grammar. You can bring up something they said 10 years ago. You can win the argument in the eyes of everyone watching and still be completely wrong. In fact, the better you are at winning arguments this way, the worse off you probably are, because you've built a wall of cleverness around yourself that prevents you from ever discovering your own errors. You get so good at defending your fortress that you never get to see the beautiful, interesting world outside its walls. You've won the battle, but you've lost the war for knowledge. So we have to start by throwing out the whole idea of winning. It's a dead end. It's a fool's game. The goal is not to be right. The goal is to get it right. And that is a completely different kind of game with a completely different set of rules. It requires a different kind of mindset, a different kind of courage. You have to be willing to do the one thing that the ego hates more than anything else. You have to be willing to lose. You have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be willing, even eager, to have your most cherished beliefs torn to shreds by a better idea or a clearer piece of evidence, because that is the only way to make progress. This isn't easy. It goes against our instincts, but it is the fundamental principle of science, and it is the secret to not only understanding the world, but to having conversations that actually lead somewhere instead of just going around in circles. It's about shifting your identity from a person who is right to a person who wants to find out what is right. And once you make that shift, everything changes. The argument is no longer a battlefield, it's a laboratory. The other person is no longer your opponent. They are your most valuable resource. They are a collaborator who is helping you for free to find the flaws in your own thinking, and that is a gift of immense value. So if the goal is to get it right instead of to be right, what does that look like in practice? It's not just a simple switch you flip in your head. It requires cultivating a very specific, and I think very beautiful, character trait, and that is intellectual humility. Now, those words sound a bit dry, a bit academic, but the idea is one of the most powerful things I've ever encountered. It doesn't mean being meek. It doesn't mean you can't have strong opinions, and it certainly doesn't mean you should just roll over and agree with anyone who sounds confident. It's the opposite of that. It's the active, courageous, and constant vigilance against your own capacity for self-deception. It's about knowing, really knowing in your bones. That the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. And boy, are we good at fooling ourselves. Our brains are wonderful machines for rationalization. We can take a belief we want to be true, and our mind will immediately generate a dozen clever-sounding reasons why it must be true. It's a lawyer that's already been paid by the client. It's not interested in justice. It's interested in winning the case for its boss, which is your ego, your desire, your pre-existing belief. Intellectual humility is the judge that presides over that lawyer. It's the part of you that stands up and says, hold on a minute, that's a very nice story. But what's the evidence? Have we considered the other side? Have we made a real effort, an honest-to-goodness effort, to prove this idea wrong? That last part is the most important. Have you tried to destroy your own argument? This is the very soul of the scientific method. When a scientist comes up with a new idea, a new hypothesis, their first job is not to run around collecting all the evidence that supports it. Their first job, their most important job, is to try and find evidence that disproves it. They must become their own harshest critic, because they know that if they don't, someone else surely will. You have to adopt the same attitude in a conversation. Your idea, your argument, is just a hypothesis. It's a temporary explanation. And the other person in the argument is your fellow scientist. Their job is to help you test your hypothesis. They are doing you a favor by trying to break it. If it's a good, solid idea, it will survive their attacks. And if it's a weak idea, it will crumble, and good riddance. This requires a fundamental separation between you and your ideas. Your ideas are not you. They are tools you are using to try and understand the world. If you have a hammer and it breaks, you don't feel personally attacked. You say, oh, a broken hammer, and you discard it and look for a better one. You must learn to treat your beliefs in the same way. When someone shows you a flaw in your reasoning, they are not showing you a flaw in your character. They are pointing out that you are holding a broken tool, and you should be grateful. They've saved you from continuing to try and build a house with a faulty instrument. They have given you the opportunity to upgrade your toolkit. That is not a loss. That is a victory. Doubt in this game is not a weakness. It is the supreme virtue. Certainty is the prison. Certainty is the state of a mind that has stopped growing. Doubt is the open space, the freedom to explore, to question, to revise. A person who is certain about everything is a person who is not paying attention, because the world is far too complicated and subtle a place to be certain about very much. So you have to practice. You have to get comfortable with the feeling of uncertainty. You have to learn to love the phrase, I don't know, or I'm not sure. In most circles, this is seen as a sign of weakness. But in the world of science and genuine inquiry, it is a badge of honor. It's the sign of a mind that is open to evidence, a mind that is still capable of learning. This is what it means to be humble in your intellect. It means your loyalty is to the truth, not to your team. It means your highest value is in the integrity of the search, not in the temporary satisfaction of feeling right. It's the understanding that the goal of a conversation, the goal of an argument, is not to prove you were right all along. It's for both parties to walk away with a slightly better, slightly more accurate view of the world than they had when they started. It's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. It turns a potential conflict into a potential collaboration. It turns an adversary into a partner. And it turns the terrifying prospect of being wrong into the exciting opportunity to learn something new, which is, after all, the most fun a person can have. So you've adopted this new mindset, this beautiful intellectual humility. You've decided your goal is to get it right, not to be right. And you walk into a discussion with someone you disagree with. What is the first thing you do? What is the first most important tactical step in this new kind of argument? You don't talk. You don't lay out your brilliant, well-reasoned case. You don't even think about your own position. The first thing you do, and you must do it with genuine, honest-to-goodness curiosity, is you listen, but not in the way most people listen, not in that passive, waiting for my turn to speak kind of way. Most of the time in an argument, we're not really listening, are we? We're reloading. The other person is talking, and their words are just a kind of background noise while we're in our own heads, polishing our next point, preparing a devastating comeback. We're listening for a pause, a breath, just a tiny opening where we can jump in and fire our next rhetorical salvo. This new way requires the exact opposite. Your first job is to become a student, and your opponent is your teacher. Your entire goal for the first phase of the conversation is to understand their position, to understand it so well, so clearly, and so charitably that you could explain it back to them and they would say, yes, that's it, you've got it. This is where you take the Feynman technique for learning and you turn it outward. Their argument is now the concept you want to understand. You get out your mental notebook, you write their position at the top of the page, and you start asking the questions you need to ask to be able to explain it simply yourself. You are not trying to believe it, you are trying to understand it. We have a nasty little habit of doing the opposite. It's called building a straw man. We take the other person's argument and we twist it into a weaker, dumber, easier to attack version, and then we burn that effigy to the ground and feel very proud of ourselves. But all we've done is defeated a figment of our own imagination. It's a deeply dishonest and completely useless exercise. The goal here is to do the opposite. You must build what's called a steel man. You must take their argument and make it as strong as possible. You have to listen to them so generously that you can articulate their position in its most powerful, most persuasive form, maybe even better than they did themselves. You have to become the world's leading expert on their point of view. How do you do this? You do it by asking questions, not cross-examination questions, not gotcha questions, but genuine clarifying questions, questions that come from a place of curiosity. That's an interesting point. Can you help me understand the reasoning behind it? Or what's the strongest piece of evidence you've seen that supports that idea? Or simply, can you say more about that? When you do this, something magical happens. The entire emotional temperature of the conversation changes. The other person who came in expecting a fight is suddenly met with genuine curiosity. Their defenses start to come down. They stop seeing you as an opponent and start seeing you as a reasonable, thoughtful person. You are no longer a threat. You are a collaborator. And as a wonderful side effect, you often discover that the argument you were having wasn't the real argument at all. You might find that you agree on 90% of the facts and that your disagreement is very small and specific. This process allows you to clear away all the noise and find the actual, precise core of the disagreement, which is usually much more interesting. The ultimate test is this. After a period of listening and asking questions, you must be able to say, okay, let me try to summarize your position to make sure I understand it. And then you state their case clearly, charitably, without any snide remarks or subtle distortions, just their argument in its steelman form. If they say, no, that's not it at all, then you haven't listened well enough and you have to go back and ask more questions. But if they say, yes, that's exactly right, or even better, wow, you said that better than I could, then you have accomplished the first and most important step. You have earned the right to have a real conversation. Only then, after you have fully inhabited their worldview, after you have demonstrated beyond any doubt that you understand where they are coming from, are you qualified to offer your own perspective, to raise a question, or to introduce a new piece of information. You haven't tried to win, you have tried to understand, and in doing so you have transformed the entire nature of the game. So there you are, you've done this remarkable thing, you've quieted your own ego, you've listened with genuine curiosity, and you have constructed a beautiful, strong, steelman version of the other person's argument. They have agreed, with some surprise, that you understand their position perfectly. Now what? What do you do with this perfect model you've built? You do not immediately bring out a wrecking ball. You do not start smashing it to pieces. That would undo all the trust and collaboration you've just established. Instead, you become a different kind of scientist. You become a structural engineer, and you begin to gently, respectfully inspect the beautiful edifice they have built. An argument is a structure. It's a series of statements linked together to support a conclusion. And just like any physical structure, it is only as strong as its weakest point. A skyscraper is not held up by its windows or its paint. It is held up by its foundation and its core beams, and that is where you must look. Your job is not to launch a broadside attack on the entire building. That just creates a lot of smoke and noise and angers the architect. Your job is to be a careful inspector, to walk around the structure, to tap on the walls, and to look for the one or two critical points on which everything else depends. You are looking for the weakest link. Every argument, no matter how complex, is built upon a few foundational assumptions. These are the core beliefs, the first principles that the rest of the argument is built upon. Very often, these assumptions are not even stated out loud. The person making the argument takes them to be so obviously true that they don't even need to be mentioned. And that right there is almost always the weakest link. The real disagreement is rarely about the logical steps that come later. The real disagreement is usually about one of these fundamental, unexamined assumptions. At the very beginning, your task is to follow the chain of logic downwards until you hit that bedrock. You can do this by playing the why game, but you must do it gently. You ask, so if I understand correctly, you believe X is true because of Y, and they'll say yes, and then you can ask, That's very interesting, and what's the reason why is true. You follow the chain, respectfully, from effect back to cause, down and down you go. Eventually, you will hit the bottom. You will arrive at a statement that the person cannot justify with any further logic. It's a statement they hold to be self-evident, a foundational belief. It might be something like people are fundamentally selfish, or a government's main role is to ensure safety. This foundation is the real heart of the matter. Once you have identified this core assumption, you can bring it out into the light, not as an accusation, but as a point of mutual curiosity. You can say, so it seems to me that the entire argument rests on this one idea. Is that fair to say? You are no longer arguing about the dozens of surface-level points. You are having a focused, productive conversation about the single idea that matters most. The other thing you're looking for as an inspector is a leap in logic. You're looking for a gap in the structure, a place where the argument jumps from point A to point C without ever building a bridge through point B. Because you have this perfect steel man model in your head, these gaps will be much more visible to you. And again, you point them out with a question, not a statement. You say, I think I'm following your logic perfectly up to point A, and I see where you land at point C, but I must be missing something. Can you walk me through the connection between them again? You are taking the blame for the confusion. You are assuming you are the one who is failing to understand. This approach is non-confrontational. It keeps the other person in the role of the teacher, and you in the role of the curious student. You are not saying your logic is flawed. You are saying my understanding is flawed. Please help me. This invites them to re-examine their own steps, and very often they will be the one to discover the weakness. This is the whole secret. You are not trying to prove them wrong. You are creating an environment where they can discover for themselves that they might be wrong. You are guiding them through their own argument with your flashlight of genuine questions and allowing them to see the parts that they themselves had not inspected closely enough. So you've done this careful, respectful inspection. You've played the curious student. You've followed the chain of logic down to its foundation, and you think you've found it, a core assumption that seems a little shaky, or a logical leap that seems a bit too wide. What now? How do you point to the crack without bringing the whole friendly conversation crashing down? You do not make a grand, abstract, philosophical counterargument. You do not say, your foundational assumption about human nature is incorrect based on the writings of the following three philosophers. That just starts a new, more complicated argument and puts the other person right back on the defensive. You do something much simpler and much more powerful. You look for a single concrete real-world counterexample. You see a general principle is a statement that claims to be true all the time. For example, the statement, all swans are white, is a general principle, and you can debate it with logic and theory for hours, but all of that debate is instantly settled by one simple thing, a black swan. Our brains are not naturally good at abstract logic. We get tangled up in it, but we are masters at understanding stories and specific examples. A single clear example that contradicts a general rule is more powerful than an hour of abstract debate because it's real, it's tangible, you can't just wave it away with clever words. So you search your mind for a black swan. You look for one specific case where their foundational assumption doesn't hold true. If their argument rests on the idea that all politicians are corrupt, you don't argue about political theory. You search for one clear example of a politician who demonstrated genuine integrity. If their argument rests on people always act in their own self-interest, you search for one clear example of true altruism. And once you have it, you do not present it as a weapon. You do not say, aha, gotcha. Your entire argument is wrong because of this one thing. You offer it as a puzzle, a point of confusion that you, the humble student, are struggling with. You keep the same curious, collaborative tone. You say something like, I think I'm really starting to see your point of view, and the principle you're explaining makes a lot of sense, but I have this one little example that's stuck in my head, and I can't figure out how it fits into the rule. Can you help me understand it? You are asking them to help you solve your confusion. You are not telling them they are wrong. This is beautiful for so many reasons. First, it's completely non-confrontational. You are not attacking them. You are asking for their help. Second, it forces the conversation out of the clouds of abstraction and down to the solid ground of reality. They can no longer talk in sweeping generalities. They have to address your specific concrete point. And now, one of a few things can happen. They might have a very good explanation for how your example fits into their rule, and if so, wonderful, you have just learned something, you have filled a gap in your own understanding. Remember, you are trying to lose, you are trying to find out if you are wrong. So this is a victory for you. More often, however, your counterexample will force them to refine their own position. They might say, that's a good point. Okay, my rule isn't that all politicians are corrupt, but that the system incentivizes corruption. Now look what's happened. You haven't won, they haven't lost. You have both moved to a more nuanced, more accurate, and more interesting position. You have made progress together. This is the very heart of the scientific method. A theory is proposed, a general rule, and then the entire community of scientists goes out and hunts for a counterexample, an observation that the theory can't explain. And when they find one, it's a reason for celebration, because it's in that moment, in trying to understand that one little exception, that all the real learning happens. The goal of a good counterexample is not to end the conversation, it's to deepen it. It's a tool for clarification, a scalpel for making precise incisions in an argument to see how it really works. And it's the most honest and effective tool there is, because it ties your discussion to the only thing that ultimately matters, which is reality. Now, this whole business, this method of building a steel man, of looking for the weakest link, of testing a principle with a single decisive counterexample, this isn't just some clever trick for winning arguments at the dinner table. This is the most powerful and successful method for discovering truth that humanity has ever invented. It's how we as a species argue with the ultimate authority, nature herself. You see, every scientific investigation is a kind of argument. The scientist has an idea, a hypothesis about how the world works. That's their position. And nature already has its position, which is the way things actually are. The scientists can't just shout their opinion at the universe and hope it agrees. They have to ask a question. They have to conduct an experiment. And an experiment, if you look at it the right way, is just the ultimate form of a counterexample. It's a carefully constructed question designed to give nature the best possible chance to prove the scientist wrong. It's a test that says, if my idea is true, then X must happen, and if my idea is false, then Y must happen, and then you stand back and you let nature answer. Nature is the most honest and brutal opponent you could ever ask for in an argument. It cannot be fooled by clever rhetoric. It doesn't care how famous you are or how many awards you've won. It is not impressed by your credentials, and it will not be swayed by your passion. All it cares about is the result of a well-designed experiment. You can have the most beautiful, elegant, and beloved theory in the world, but if a single repeatable experiment contradicts it, the theory is wrong, end of story. That one little fact, that one black swan, has more power than all the expert opinions and beautiful mathematics in the world. You cannot argue with the data. And that is the most profound lesson that science can teach us, and one we must bring to our own human arguments, that reality is the ultimate arbiter. Our goal in a discussion is not to convince the other person that our map of the world is prettier. Our goal is to work together to see if both of our maps align with the territory itself. I saw this firsthand in the investigation of the Challenger space shuttle disaster. There were all sorts of meetings and presentations with complicated charts and confident-sounding managers. There was a whole narrative, a whole public relations story. But the reality was, in a little piece of rubber, an O-ring that had failed in the cold, the engineers knew it, the data showed it. For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled, and this is true for everything. For a successful understanding of the world, reality must take precedence over your ego, because the truth cannot be fooled either. It doesn't care if you win the argument, it just is. So you must strive to be like nature in your arguments, an honest broker of evidence. When the other person presents you with a fact, a real-world counterexample that contradicts your belief, you must treat it with the same respect a scientist treats an experimental result. You cannot wish it away. You cannot explain it away with clever excuses. You must face it. Your loyalty must be to the facts, not to your side. This is the highest form of intellectual integrity. It's the commitment to change your mind when presented with new, compelling evidence. It's the understanding that the goal is not to protect your cherished beliefs, but to constantly update them so they get a little bit closer to the truth. This is what it means to truly argue like a scientist. You are not a lawyer making a case. You are a judge weighing the evidence, and you have to be willing to rule against your own preferred outcome. It is the hardest thing in the world to do, and it is also the most important, because when you adopt this stance, you are no longer just having an argument. You are participating in the grand, centuries-old human project of figuring things out. You are aligning yourself with the forces of curiosity, of reason, and of reality itself, against the forces of dogma, of ego, and of self-deception. If this was useful to you, give the video a like and maybe subscribe so we can keep figuring things out together. And for a little experiment, if you really got this far, leave a comment with the words intellectual honesty in it. It'll be our little signal that you're part of the club that's more interested in getting it right than being right. Thanks for spending the time.